I can start with two comments, one minor, but it has strongly contributed to the presence of life on Earth. So one minor, and the second would be a major comment. So Shamila, you discussed about UV radiation, but in the tropics and near the equator line, the ecosystem in general in the past and today have received and are receiving more UV radiations than in temperate areas, okay? And this has strongly contributed to the genesis of biodiversity in the tropics due to some mutations on the genome, so generating plenty of different species and beautiful species in the tropics. So, UV radiation can be in some parts beneficial as well.
Sure.
For biodiversity, okay. So, my major concern on the comments is with climate change and globalization in general. I really think that, the scientific game has strongly changed. Many thinkings that we have in the past are falling down. Let's take the example of postulate by Robert Koch or postulates by Louis Pasteur. All these are falling down today. And so, research on climate change and research on globalization in general, makes that many recent and old thinkings are not true today. So this is, an excellent way to reorganize, the way we are thinking today research.
I'm a research scientist, so I wouldn't agree with you that everything they discovered then was not true. What they discovered then was with the knowledge they had then. And we are building on that. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're using that information and knowledge to what we use today and taking it further, given the situation we have, given the advance in science that we have today, we can better those findings. And I think that's what it's all about. But UV radiation, yes. Too little is no good, because it can't fix even vitamin D in your body. And too much is also no good. So we see that when you have the thinning of the ozone layer in the Antarctic and in the poles, what happens is that you have an increase in storms over the tropical area because you have a thinning of this ozone layer, because of all these chemical refrigerants that we use. And so we have the thinning and the clouds come more towards the center. What happens? You have storms, increased number of storms over the Pacific. And what do you have? You have all what we've seen today about climate change. You have the increase in infectious diseases. We have other vector-borne diseases. You also have people who are migrating. These are the climate change migrants. Okay, so I think and their health is also affected. So the effects of the UV, yes, there's too little and there's too much, like in everything today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's clear that with those issues of climate change and global change in general, there is this need to integrate the different approaches. That was the issue already of the Earth System Science Partnership in the beginning of the 2000s. Now it's the program Future Earth that aims at that. And it's a challenge, which doesn't mean that we still need solid bases on the disciplines, but we also need a way to integrate them, which it's not that easy. And so I don't know if you have some suggestions, but it's a challenge.
You made this parallel between the Montreal Protocol for CFCs and climate change today. I think there's a big difference in the fact that when we stopped using those CFCs, the chemical industry was quite ready to put substitute on the market. Today we're addicted to carbon fossil fuel energy. And the point is that the economy is not ready to change. So I think that what we miss in that game to convince the politics is costs. And health has a big cost, and the impact of climate change on health will have a big cost. And I guess that we miss today some evaluation of these costs, and we have to put research on this topic into play.
Yeah, that's the cost-benefit trade-off of policies to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel energy and transition to other cleaner technologies for energy, I think is a critical need. And it's something that I'm seeing increasingly in the major policy initiatives. For example, in the United States, last year, the Obama administration proposed a rule to limit emissions of power plants. Perhaps not limiting them as much as I would hope, but still a 30% reduction by, I forget exactly what year. But in the analysis, the economic and health analysis that was presented as in support of that rule was a strong health benefit that outweighed any control costs. I mean, they made a strong case that actually the air pollution related health benefits would more than pay for the costs that it would cost the power industry to achieve these goals. So I'm seeing that kind of analysis increasingly. Certainly it's being used in our government for trying to push the new regulations. And I think we're going to need more of that. Did others want to?
Just on the same thing.
Please,
yeah.
quickly.
I think you raised an important point there, and that is that how can one compare the success of the Montreal Protocol where companies knew what were the replacement for CFCs? Well, the companies knew what the replacement was. That was the HCFCs. And today we're phasing out the HCFCs. We have an accelerated phase out because we have their very low ODS, ozone depleting potential, but they're greenhouse gases. So yes, the companies did provide some kind of means, but now we got to look at to the next step. And that's why I say we're always building upon this. But you're right, the costs are absolutely important. And why the Montreal Protocol was successful was not because companies were developing these refrigerants, and they were almost ready, put it that way, but there was a financial mechanism for countries taking into account the cost benefits of the phase out, helping them to continue the socioeconomic development and going this way, just like developed countries have done. But at the same time, providing them the financial means and the technology to be able to continue economic growth. And I think that's what's missing today in terms of the cost benefits and the analysis. But there's another analogy between what's going on today and what went on in 1985 when the Montreal Protocol was signed, and that is the science. And you mentioned the science and how the science informed policymakers. Well, we have scientific panels made up of international scientists, which is called, where they're part of panels called Economic Assessment Panel, Technical Options Committee panel, and they provide up-to-date scientific information for governments, for policymakers, to use the science in order to change the way governments think and the way policymakers can put in place policy to phase out these ozone-depleting substances. And maybe that's what's missing today.
That sounds like a nearly ideal scenario. But I think the problem that we have, not only the cost issue, but really a very, very large vested interest in the oil industry. Really, at least in America, I mean, they've slowed us down for decades on this topic because of their strong control of politics. I think there's a.
I wanted to follow on that with not two questions, but two remarks. I mean, one is about the need for more research and more integrative research and so on, which I completely shared. But in a sense, when it comes to the integration of economic and social factors or elements in the story, what has surfaced in the past 5-10 years of evaluation, including cost assessment, is somehow working in the same direction, which is to say that if you take health into account, then the picture is much more rosy and interesting. And what is a big challenge, I would say, is to look at the co-benefits perspective also from the other way around. And the other way around is to be able to actually evaluate how far what is envision, what his approach has a response, has policy, has change, his technical and social at the same time, how that will affect health and will or not benefit to health. So it's part of the cost-benefit calculus, but it's a symmetrical way of looking at it, and this second dimension is very, very poorly addressed in the
in the literature for the moment. That's the first remark. The second is when the Montreal Protocol is a fascinating story. At the same time, I really think it's operating at such a different scale. I mean, that both technology and economically speaking, than the greenhouse gas emission. I mean that one of the main lessons is not only that we have a whole coherent economic system which has been built around this carbonized, this use of fossil fuels, and that is challenged by the climate change problem. So in that sense, the scale is really different. And the second element is the fact that what has surfaced in the international discussion in the past 15 years around climate change is the centrality of the developing versus developed world divide. That the perspective is not only to find out technical solutions making possible a decarbonized economy, but also inventing a different way of producing and consuming, which can be attractive for southern countries and make the notion of the energy transition not something that they look at as a punishment which would mean that growth is not possible, economic development is not possible, and we should have to pay the price for what has been done since the Industrial Revolution in the northern countries. And this question of alternative modes of producing and consuming is really not an easy one to define and to solve.
Yeah, just a few comments, quick comments. Concerning the, I think the message to the policymaker from research and has to be, cautious to a certain extent. I mean, I think they are used to certainties and, not act before being certain. And what most of the scientists would tell them now is the level of uncertainty that we have. And we have to get them addicted to, that everything is uncertain and there are different levels, but they can take action even in the presence of uncertainty. And this is true in many, many areas, but this is not something very easy, to provide, because we cannot tell them something is certain if it's not. I mean, so the message has to be a little bit more complex to the policymaker, but I think they have to get used to that, and that's important for us. Otherwise, our credibility would be decreased if we change the speech. The second point is that we are all agree that the multidisciplinarity is extremely important, and sometimes there are small, small changes that can help, the research in this field. Let me give you an example. In France, we have the National Agency for Research, and they have different, they call challenges. So you have to apply to one of the challenges. And environment is a challenge, but health is another challenge. And agriculture is another challenge. Not so easy to submit something between environment and health, because in the health you will be compared to genetics, immunology, and what's climate in that. And in the ecosystem they need some more exciting things. So now this year we hope that we have the same text in the three challenges. There is the same text on the health and environment, actually, either for contaminant or climate or for vector-borne disease, the interaction between environment and health. So it's not another challenge, but it's the same sub-challenge in the same text will be there. So you tell them, I want to be there, and that will be studied separately. So that may help. I mean, we hope that it would help. So just apply. I'm happy, those people who stayed at the end, now and you can apply for this kind of things. That's the message I want to give.
That's a very interesting development, and it's one that's very we can learn in the United States from as well, because we have historically had exactly the same divide from our national funding agencies. We have a National Science Foundation that funds the climate modeling and even some social science work, but then the National Institute of Health funds the molecular biology and the mechanistic genetic stuff. But the climate and health issue really falls in the intersection, and it's something that has not really been addressed in a comprehensive way.
There was a joint call, which is called Ecology of Infectious Disease, between NSF and
There are some examples that, yeah, exactly. So I think you've all been extremely patient, and it's been a very stimulating discussion this afternoon. I think perhaps we should formally draw the meeting to a close, but encourage people to stay around if they want to have informal discussions. Would that make sense, Robert?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So thanks to everyone for your attendance, and thanks to the panel.